This recording was produced by Oregon Trail Baptist Church. If you'd like to get more recordings, or to leave your feedback, please visit us at www.otbchurch.com or write us at P.O. Box 298, Guernsey, Wyoming 82214. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that today's recording will not just challenge your thinking, but will transform your life.
All right, so we're on Theology of Everyday Life, Lesson 32, Marriage in America, Dating Principles and Problems. Now, again, I'm going to reiterate this because I feel like, in some ways, this is out of place. But the reality is all of us are encountering young people who are getting married here and there. And whether it's our grandchildren or great-grandchildren, it's good to have a view of what the problems are. It's good to know what Scripture says. And hopefully you're in a position where at least your grandchildren, some if not all, are willing to talk to you at times in life. So, the same theme, or the quote for the series is, what's common seems to be normal, and what's normal seems to be right. And as we kind of applied this to the idea of marriage or finding a spouse, we've asked several questions. Should we trust the culture? No. We've seen the decline there. We looked at what's changed from about the 1700s to now. We asked the question, should we trust the Bible? Yes, we should. However, the Bible doesn't lay out for us a how-to guide of how to find a spouse. In fact, within the Bible, there's a little bit of difference in culture of how they found their spouses. So we need to find the biblical principles and use them. We asked the question, what are we after? And marriage is the goal. So in finding a spouse, we're looking for or towards marriage. And we had 4 principles there, that of partnership, promise, procreation, and a picture. And before we move on, let me remind you of the verse here from Proverbs 18:22. Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord. All right, page 1. We're going to start covering dating principles. Now, I want to put a disclaimer on this, okay? I don't care if you use the term dating or you use the term courtship, okay? I really don't care. Because there's been people who have used the term dating, and when you listen to what they're doing, you're like, oh, well, they're following biblical principles. And there's people who use the term courtship, and they're following what I would lay out as dating principles. So it's not the terms. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, pastor is anti-dating. Well, no, but I have to qualify things in different categories so I can explain things. This lesson is going to cover the fundamental philosophy and methodology of how dating happens today. Now, I recognize we also have come up in a Judeo-Christian culture. There are still remnants of Christianity, especially from the Puritans that came to America, or the Pilgrims, and the Puritan influence in their writings from England. There's still some of that in our generations, especially our older generations. So as some of you may, as we go through this, some of you think, well, that's not how it was when I was dating. Well, how long ago was that? Things have changed a lot in the last 20, 30, 50 years. And so anyway, I wanted to put a disclaimer there. I don't want anyone to feel awkward, especially like in later conversations, if you refer to when you were dating your wife and like, oh, pastor's not for dating. No, don't worry about that. That's not my point. But I'm going to classify dating as one thing and courtship as another, just so I have some terms to hang these principles under. Have a quote here or a definition of dating, and this is really a good, concise one. And after I looked at the lesson, I noticed a spelling error. See if you can find it too. That's my fault, not Wayne Van Geldren's. It says, dating is the independent developing by a man and woman of a temporary romantic relationship for personal emotional satisfaction through the means of thoughts, looks, notes, talks, or other events. Did or ever used to get spelled with an E at the end? Maybe in Old English. I don't know. I don't know how that E got there. Iron ore, there we go. That is the shift, one of the shifts we've noticed from the 1700s to today, is the lack of parental involvement. One quote here says, dating differs from previous courtship practices in the following ways. 1, the introduction of the man to the woman by a member of the family is not considered necessary. How many of you went through where if you're getting married to somebody, the young man needed to go talk to your dad?
I had to go talk to his mom.
Did you? See, and I didn't think that would happen because that was much later in life. I thought your mom had already passed away by that point. So that you went to go talk to his mom, and your dad had passed away by then, right?
No, I had to get her approval. Some people still do that. As the kid who talked to Matt.
Yeah. Is that fading away though?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. And that's one of the things, that is kind of an old remnant of this, but it is starting to fade away. And I think that's a sad thing. I'll get into why more. Going on with the quote, number 2, there's no chaperone. There's no commitment on the part of the male or female to continue the relationship beyond the date itself. The date is planned by the adolescents themselves, not by their elders. And physical intimacies such as hand-holding, petting, kissing, and sexuality are expected rather than forbidden. What do you think is driving that in our culture? Culture itself, I would argue television sitcoms. Because you just look through history in the last 20, 30 years of television, if you're looking at a TV show from the 1990s, people weren't quite like that, but it was past the edge of where people are just on the edge. But then by the 2000s, it's a little farther, and the culture moves behind the sitcoms, because what they see in the television, they perceive as normal, so it creates an inward sense of right and wrong based off of a television show, and then they carry that into real life. So I really think TV's had a large influence here.
Well, and with TV, they might be uncomfortable with watching it at first, but then if they let themselves continue watching, maybe something that's uncomfortable, they start to desensitize to it, and then it becomes normal.
Yeah, there's a desensitizing that takes place over time. I think it was Leave It to Beaver was the first TV show to ever show the inside of a bathroom. And that was just a shocker back then. And that's several things in TV history are kind of that way. I'll pull this one up. I was in Florida, and I don't know why, but I remember listening to this on the radio. It was the last movie put on VHS. Anybody know what that was? The last movie to get put on a VHS? It was Disney's Incredibles. And they were talking about the last one, everything else from here on out is going to be DVD. And then they talked about the history of the VHS. And the VHS, the old tapes, the reason they made them was for the people basically Christians, who wouldn't go to the movies. So they made the VHS so they could put the movies in the home. But I thought that was an interesting, there was enough of a Christian subculture that said, no, we're not going to go to the movies, but then they invited it right into their home. So it's had, not just television shows, but movies and other things have had their effect, and that's very clear. Principle 1. Now, these are not scriptural principles. These are kind of the dating principles. These are why you date, and these are the philosophy or mindset behind dating. So principle 1, anybody want to take a stab at it? Pleasure, there it is, yes. Are you cheating off the back? Is she looking on the back answer key? It does? Okay, there we go. Hey, they're just reading ahead, that's fine. Okay, the pleasure of romantic intimacy drives the motive to join the dating system. And again, we kind of looked at this, the dating dating is starting earlier and earlier, as young as like 10 to 13. Now, what 10 or 13-year-old is ready at all to get close to marriage? They're 10 or 13, they're just hitting that junior high age where, as many parents would put it, they lose their brain. You know, something happens in junior high, everything they knew goes out the window. One rabbi, I like what he says here. He says, love that hinges solely on sensual attraction reflects only self-gratification. People have invented a whole lexicon of false terminology to express distortions of life truths. For example, people say they love fish. What do they do with the fish they love? First, they snuff out its life. Then they cut it up and bake it, broil it, fry it, chew it, and swallow it. Do they really love fish? Most certainly not. They love themselves and seek self-gratification. The poor fish only serves to achieve this end. The term love often has the same connotation when used to refer to the opposite sex. In such cases, it means I love him or her for the pleasure and self-gratification that he or she is able to give me. Does that not describe a lot of the dating game out there? I'm sure Dennis, you work at the lunch window. I'm sure you get to see some of this played out in the high school on a weekly basis. This type of love that is driven by personal gratification and pleasure ends up doing what? What ends up happening over time? Leroy's reading ahead. He said, it wears up and they break up. So what happens? Well, the relationship gets too hard or boring or too hard to maintain. Someone better comes along. A partner no longer meets his or her needs or what you think his needs. There's quarrels or misunderstandings. Romantic feelings and excitement disappeared. So what do they do? Find somebody new. Yep. They break up and find someone new. So that's all geared around if the whole dating thing is simply to have personal pleasure, then why not? If all the excitement's gone, why not find somebody else who is more exciting and more fun? Principle 2. Anybody want to take a stab at that one? Personal choice. This principle grows out of the basic humanistic assumption that a young person's heart is generally good and they'll make the right choice. Now, remember, we're shifting in culture from parents being involved in this decision and families being involved to, we're shifting away from that to the individual. What's happening? It's all my choice. Forget about mom and dad. Forget about other people in my life. What does that do? Do you think mom and dad maybe have some wisdom between their ears that maybe you don't? Do you think maybe they can see into, well, I don't know about this? No, we don't always make the right choices on our own. And we can neglect counsel and end up in a lot of trouble. The boy or girl goes after the person they find most personally attractive or available at that point to meet the impulse for their romantic environment. They're going after who they see as most attractive. Now, what was one of the key qualifications? I'm going to pick your brain from a couple weeks ago. Back in the 1700s with the Puritans, what was one of the key qualifications of marriage? What's that? Purity? And what were they looking for in a mate? Yes, the purity and character. Okay? If someone couldn't support himself, he's not a good option. I was reading a book that covers from about the 1700s to the 1980s on the courtship scene. And they have several excerpts of these letters back and forth between people. And in the 1700s, there's this minister who is taking this minister job, and he has this girl that he's writing to, and they're writing back and forth, but he hasn't got to that point where he's making enough to support a family. So their relationship is on hold because he can't yet support a family. He doesn't have that level of income or a job to do so. And I find it interesting that character is that's not what young people today are looking for. It's more about who's fun, who's exciting, who's pretty, who suits my fancy. And let's be honest, if someone has great character, but you absolutely can't stand their personality, you probably shouldn't marry them, okay? And remember, even back in the 1700s, personal attraction was a secondary qualification. If you're not attracted to this person, you got problems here. Number 3 here, little or no authoritative control or self-control would be really good in that blank. I have actually for the blank, it's accountability. But why those two go hand in hand? You know, there's something about having a little brother or sister in the back seat that keep people from doing what they're not supposed to do. Now, during that process of getting to know a person, yes, you're going to need to spend time together. You're going to need to talk through things. You're going to need to discover much about each other. But the pushing away of all family and the pushing away of a chaperone has led to many, shall I just say, broken homes and single moms. And just our culture's riddled with problems. And there's that little box there that should have been up. I wonder, when it comes to the breakup that happens, how many of those problems get heard in divorce courts today? You know, of the relationship has gotten boring, or someone better comes along, or you're not meeting my needs, or you know, the vows and commitments don't mean much anymore. So anyway, that was a little backtrack. Page 4, I want to pull in a verse here, Proverbs 11:14, where no counsel is, the people fall, but in a multitude of counselors there is safety. Modern dating, and again, I'm not referring even as much to the dating that some of you have done years ago. But when you push away your family, and when you push away the voices in your life, like whether, you know, pastor or close friends or others, when you push those away and say, "This, I see this as a good thing," are you not setting yourself up for trouble? Because in a multitude of counselors, there is safety. And lastly here, the whole system here, the parents end up forfeiting their responsibility. It's the parents' responsibility to be involved in helping find a spouse for their children. All right, C. Principle, that should be 3. Wow. 1, 2, 2. I got lots of typos here today. Principle 3. What do you think that blank is? This one ties in actually to something previously said. Periodic relationships. Periodic relationships. Dating is centered on temporary relationships for temporal fun. There's a recent quote here in the box, and I'm not endorsing this quote, I'm just using it as an example of how much it's even infiltrated Christian literature. It says, the purpose of dating in high school is to get to know as many girls and boys as possible. Now, I don't have to date a bunch of girls to get to know a bunch of girls. I mean, I can be friends with lots of people. I can get to know a lot of people without dating them. And again, if you don't know the person at all, maybe you shouldn't start dating. But again, it's coming out of the desire for self-gratification, a desire for pleasure, a desire for fun. So let's join the dating game. Let's find somebody to date. Let's try to get on the merry-go-round of love. And when we do that, then we wonder why we end up with broken relationships over and over. And might it not be this continual, a temporary relationship with this boy or girl, lasting a month or 2 months, a week or two with this boy or girl, a month or 2 months, 6 months with this boy or girl. And it doesn't matter even if they don't get physically involved. Doesn't that mentally prepare someone for divorce? They got used to the heartbreak of the first boyfriend. They got used to the heartbreak of the second. And each time it gets to where it's not so bad, to where by the time you're in marriage, why not? It's just now a legal document doing it. And as we looked at statistics, today people aren't even getting married. The divorce rate is going down. In the last 5-10 years, the divorce rate has gone down, but so is the marriage rate. So yes, there's less divorces, but there's less marriages too. So I really think that this, and I don't want to be, if you had more than one person you dated, you're bad. That's not what I'm saying. Because if you were interested in somebody and you had a date with somebody and maybe you dated them for a while and you're like, this is not going to work. There are some key things that this person thinks or believes or problems they have that this is not going to work. Then by all means, bail out. But the reality is the system today that kids are being brought up as normal is let's have a girlfriend, let's have 2 or 3 girlfriends, and then they wonder why, come later in life, problems occur. Comments, questions before we jump into the next question, the next little section here. All right, everybody's quiet today. Dating problems. First, there's the sin problems. Okay, these principles of really selfish principles have led to several problems. First of all is impurity. Now the impurity has 3 levels: physical, mental, and emotional. Christ said in Matthew 5, "Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, whosoever looketh at a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart." Today we're running with rampant problems with pornography, and Christ here says, look, it's not whether just you committed a physical act, but it's whether you are mentally involved and checked in. And many people in the dating scene, even today, they don't go all the way physically. But their hearts have been tied together emotionally and mentally. They've bonded, and then even if they haven't gone all the way physically, it's a very heartrending thing when they split off. I'm going to skip over the emotional there, but I guess I kind of already talked about it. There is an emotional bond that forms, and don't negate that. Also, then the physical intimacy in the relationship. Scripture has called for us to commit one to another. Genesis 26. I'm thinking 1:26, where man and woman are. Let's turn to there. I don't know why I put that reference there. Genesis 26:8. 26:8. I vaguely remember the fact I was running out of space in the handout, so I condensed it. Instead of putting the verse in, I put the reference. But Genesis 26:8. 26, yeah. Okay, that's what it is. And it came to pass when he had been there a long time, this is Jacob, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out the window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. Okay, in marriage, it's expected for you to be committed to one another and engaged with one another, even on a physical level. And here Abimelech looks out the window. If you remember the story, Jacob has told, just like Abraham, his father did, this isn't Jacob, this is Isaac, I'm sorry. Isaac has told Abimelech that this is my sister, when she wasn't. Abimelech sees the two of them kind of getting fresh with each other and goes, wait a minute, you'd never do that with your sister. And so pulls him in and says, what's going on? Again, just like Abraham gets caught in his lie. But it's expected that a husband and wife love each other in a physical way. It's expected that they desire each other and they want to be together. It's expected that they have romantic feelings for one another. What happens when these things which are reserved for marriage are then given up outside of marriage? It's a very dangerous thing. Some key verses here. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, "What, know ye not, that he which is joined to a harlot is one body? For two, saith he, shall be one flesh." 1 Thessalonians 4, "For this is the will of God, even your sanctification, that ye should abstain from fornication, that every one of you should know how to possess his vessel in sanctification and honor, not in the lust of concupiscence, even as the Gentiles which know not God, that no man go beyond and defraud his brother in any manner, because that the Lord is the avenger of all such, as we also have forewarned and testified you." Paul warns Timothy. He says in 1 Timothy, "The elder women as mothers and the younger as sisters with all purity." Character and purity are essential as you're going into the marriage relationship. And that purity is not simply physical, it's the emotional and mental as well. 1 Corinthians 6:18, "Flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body." 1 Corinthians 7, "Now according to the things whereof he wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman." Now there's been a lot of discussion on this verse because some people take it as far as, you should never handshake. That's not exactly what Paul's saying. But the reality is, in a relationship, if you're dating someone, the first time you hold hands sends that little electric shock up your arm. You know what I'm talking about? It's exciting. And so even just sitting next to them, and that's what Paul's getting at here. Hey, it's good not to touch a woman in that way. If you're having those feelings, get your hands off. Matthew 5:30, "If thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and that not thy whole body should be cast into hell." Hebrews 13:4, "Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge." So these are some of the problems and the sin problems that enter into dating. Also, they end up breaking the law of God. "You shall have no other gods before me." It's very easy to place, even in marriage, you can place your spouse above the Lord, but to place the dating relationship above the Lord. "Honor thy father and thy mother." It is not honoring to mom and dad when you're pushing them out of the most significant decisions in your life. And I recognize as we get older, and maybe you've been out of the home for years, and you've been living on your own, and really mom and dad are not as much the authority that they used to be in your life. If you don't even consult them, if you don't even talk to them about this, it's a problem, because you're not honoring them. It says, "Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife." These factors begin to play in when instead of following the Lord and following what He has for our life, we pursue self-gratification in our pursuit of a spouse. 3, we end up searing our conscience through continual yielding to temptation. Paul said to Timothy, "Holding faith and conscience, which some, having put away concerning faith, have made shipwreck." If you do anything involved in dating or courting even, if you do anything that your conscience is bothering you about, stop. Don't keep going. Don't go beyond. And what can happen is we can sear our conscience through resisting the Spirit because we're so intent on this relationship that we really turn our faith into a shipwreck. Other sins can develop: jealousy, bitterness, anger, inward sins here. not only is there a sin problem with dating, but it also has some development problems. You lose social development in family relationships. Used to be, and I guess it still is for some people, but less and less so, when a young suitor was finding a wife, or the family would have him over. The family would have a meal with him. The family would do things with him, and the whole family would get to know this individual. Is that still the case today, or is it less and less? Yeah. And there is a lot of half and half. Why do you say that? Yeah. Right. And that's true. So in your case, within your own family, it's been kind of a half and half. So, and that's kind of, how to say it, your family subset may have a higher percentage than others too. You also think of how many broken homes there are with young kids who are growing up with single parents, and they're entering into this realm with a broken home, and now if they want to introduce their significant other to mom and dad, well, they're split up, and it's getting more and more complicated in our culture. Yeah, and they seem to keep rolling through different names, and this also can lead to a lack or loss of emotional development because they've had so many breakups, and breakups can be nasty. They can become unstable or insecure in who they are. They can also become callous to others, and they can build up walls that are very difficult once they do get married for the spouse to break down, for him to get into his spouse or his wife's life, or on the other side, husband. It also can lead to marriage problems. It lessens God's design for marriage by cheapening marriage's privileges. Lack of appreciation for marriage because it privileges physical, emotional intimacies, and those were all enjoyed beforehand. And that can lead to an inability even to trust your spouse. So in summary of this lesson, to kind of put it into a nice, neat little package, the principles behind modern dating, and again, this is not necessarily, this is our culture, the way it's going. It's for pleasure. The security is all in a personal choice, not in the counsel of family and close friends. The goal, or the future goal, is just a temporary, periodic relationship. The attitude is physical aloneness and intimacy. The idea itself comes from the world, which is why we're doing this series. What's common seems normal. What normal seems to be right. The authority here is not our parents, but it's yourself and what you think and what you want. The guideline is what makes you happy, what brings you pleasure, and that's the goal as well. What brings personal pleasure. So next week we'll get into the flip side. Comments, questions there? We've kind of, again, we've seen this somewhat playing out in our culture. Most of you have probably bemoaned what you see in culture, and yet maybe you haven't sat down and classified what's going on. But anyway, comments, questions there before we let out. I'm right on time today. This is good. Let's close in prayer. Father, we thank you for your word. And Lord, today, as we looked not as much as your word, more at the world's approach to finding a spouse, Lord, would you help us to speak into the lives of the young people who we have influence with, whether it be grandchildren or great-grandchildren, whether it be kids down the street who talk to us and chat with us about what's going on, or whether it simply be maybe just tucking the information away for a later date when you would have us to share with someone else. Lord, I ask that you would give us the ability to see the culture, to see the problems, And not that we would so focus on that, but that we would focus on you. And we'd turn our gaze upon you. And in doing so, we really seek to honor you in some of the most significant decisions of our life. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen.